I always wanted to do another video about the headliner mechanic, but even I did not expect for this mechanic to be so broken. Now, I will be covering the updated rule set, but that alone would not make for a very interesting video, so I will also include 3 new interactions that will absolutely smash the headliner rules into pieces. But before we get to the smashing part, let's cover the intended rule set that Riot has officially confirmed. For starters, if you skip a headliner, then the next time the same unit reappears as a headliner, it will have a different trait amplified. So if you skip an executioner Twitch, then the next time you roll him as a headliner, he will be a punk Twitch. Units with 3 traits like Gnar will always roll a 50-50 between the 2 traits that weren't selected the last time. In this example, I have a Mosha Gnar, so there is a 50-50 between Pentakill and Superfan. After rolling down a bit of gold, he ends up with Pentakill, then Superfan, and then Pentakill again. This means you cannot guarantee the outcome for units with 3 traits. So here is a fun fact. Everything that I just said is wrong. I mean, it's the intended rule set, but I think it was around patch 14.2 where this pattern stopped working. In this example, on the most recent patch, I went for a roll down and lots of different units ended up repeating their headliner traits. For example, here you can see how Heartstealer Phelius and Superfan Gnar show up twice in a row instead of alternating their traits. This is an annoying bug for reroll comps, since they sometimes want a specific trait for the headliner and they won't be able to guarantee it anymore. Since we're already on the topic of intended rules not working, there is supposed to be a lockout rule for traits. Skipping a trait means you're not supposed to see the same trait again in the next 4 shops. So in theory, rolling past a country headliner means you can't see a new country headliner in the next 4 shops. This is also currently not working. Here you can see how I got country Urgot into country Katarina and shortly after KDA Nico followed by a KDA Kaiser. Something that currently should work are the protection rules. After you have a specific headliner in your shop, you cannot see the same unit again for a certain amount of shops. For 1 cost, 2 cost and 3 cost champions, the number of shops you are locked out of is 7. For higher tier units, this number is lower. If you see a 4 cost headliner like Ari, then she's locked out of the next 5 shops. For 5 cost headliners like Jin, the game will prevent you from seeing him again for the next 4 shops. Aside from protection rules, there are 2 more rules that take the champion pool into consideration. The first one states, if you have more than 4 copies of a 4 cost or 3 copies of a 5 cost, then you can't see the headliner. 1 cost, 2 cost and 3 costs have no limitation. This rule used to work a bit differently and it was based around the global champion pool, but this ended up being too frustrating for players, which is why this rule got changed to its current form. The second rule states there must be 3 copies remaining in the pool for the champion to be able to show up as a headliner. It is somewhat obvious, but it's still worth mentioning, since buying a headliner will pull 3 units out of the pool and you don't want to end up in a situation where you buy something that doesn't exist anymore. Something worth mentioning that has changed since my last video is that there was a hidden, unintended rule that I didn't catch back then. When you skipped a headliner like Brawler Olaf, you ended up locking out every unit that had the Brawler trait. This interaction was fixed in patch 14.2 and you don't have to worry about it anymore. The lockout rule was also based around skipping a headliner, which is why you would see a lot of players buying and then selling their headliner to prevent these lockouts from occurring and to get their desired headliner faster. This also doesn't matter anymore. There is no difference between selling or skipping a headliner since patch 14.2. Chances are, if you're a dedicated TFT player, then you already knew everything that I just talked about. Until this point. From here on out, I will show you how to manipulate these rules to give yourself an advantage. This is a bit controversial, but honestly, in my experience, highlighting problems tends to have better results if you want something fixed. The first rule that we're going to break is one that I actually haven't even mentioned yet. It goes like this. If you have a headliner, then you will see a new headliner every 4 shops. This is one of the most basic headliner rules in the game, and there is a way to ignore it. TFT has a bit of an interesting layout because both you and your opponent have their own board. Sometimes the opponents will come to you, and sometimes you will pack up your stuff, go through a portal and fly to them. Now, what actually happens to your units when you visit the opponent? They all transform into blue orbs and join your little legend who's jumping into the portal. Now, why is this important? Well, it turns out that visiting an enemy board has an unintended side effect. For around 1 second, you don't have any units. If you don't have any units, then you don't have any headliners. And if you don't have any headliners, then the rules don't apply to you. Now, I might be exaggerating this interaction a little bit because it doesn't completely break the game and you won't end up running around with multiple headliners. That stuff comes later. So what can you do in this 1 second time frame? The answer is you can roll and get yourself a new headliner in the shop. Normally, when you have a headliner and there's one in your shop, you would have to roll 4 times until you see a new one. With this method, if you time your roll at a specific moment, the game will bypass the 4 shop rule and grant you a new headliner. It's not completely broken because, as far as I can tell, you still can't buy this new headliner unless you sell your current one. And since that one is likely on your board, you would have to lock the shop and wait 1 round. But there are still some situations, especially if you have a reroll augment, where you might want to wait with your rolls to increase the amount of headliners you see in your shops. What's kind of cool about this trick is that you can guarantee the outcome every single time. All you have to do is to hover your mouse at the end of the stage number at the top of your interface. The cursor will now act as a wall, and once you see the blue bar hitting your cursor, you press D. This setup is based around a 1080p resolution, and for me it has worked every single time. If you play with a different setup, then you will either have to create your own setup or just get a feeling for the correct timing. Keep in mind, this will only work when you visit the enemy board, but usually you have more than enough time to tell if this is happening or not. Now the next bug, tech, is a bit more advanced. It took me quite a while to track this one down, so this is the perfect time where I want to remind you that subscribing helps to support this channel and it allows me to make more videos like this in the future. I think there's also this bell thingy, but I don't really know what happened to it. Now at some point in set 10, you might have seen a clip of a player buying a headliner, but he didn't receive a headliner. Instead, he got a 2-star unit for free. Now this may or may not surprise you, but the culprit behind this interaction is my favorite unit of set 10, Akali. I mean, I don't really care about any of her abilities, but I do love her breakout trait. So what exactly is going on here? I'll spare you the process on how I got here, because initially I thought the setup was way more complicated. The cause for this bug ended up being ridiculously simple. First, you will need a KDA or true damage Akali headliner. The next step is to have a new headliner in your shop. Then you want to swap Akali's trait by either adding or removing KDA or true damage units. Finally, you have to sell any unit on your bench. If you follow these steps, then you can now sell your Akali headliner, buy the new headliner in the shop and receive a 2-star unit for free. While this new unit has a headliner layout, it's not really a headliner. This unit won't have any bonus combat stats, it won't add anything to your trait counter, and it also won't prevent you from buying a new headliner. It will strictly act as a 2-star unit. So if you roll your shop, then you will be offered a new headliner that you're free to buy. From what I can tell, this only works in this specific setup. It won't work in the multi-talented portal, and there's also no point in using a normal Akali or an Executioner headliner. For some reason, the process of swapping the traits of either a true damage or KDA Akali headliner and selling a unit causes the headliner in your current shop to bug out. While this is certainly powerful, since it requires a specific Akali headliner, I don't think this method will end up causing too much havoc. Unless, of course, you start to abuse it to get free 2-star legendaries. But surely nobody would think of that. Before I wrap up the video, there is one more interaction that I want to share. There's a pretty good chance that you've seen this one before, since it happened to a bunch of streamers already. If you have a unit pair, find the same unit as a headliner, buy the unit, sell it, roll, and then upgrade the unit, you can sometimes receive a fake headliner. This fake headliner will benefit from bonus combat stats, but initially it does not add anything to your traits. If this bug ever happens to you, don't be mad about it, because if you know what to do, you are at a massive advantage. First of all, the game actually thinks you have a headliner and will only offer you a new headliner every 4 shops. But weirdly enough, the game doesn't prevent you from buying a new one. If you buy a new headliner and run both of them on your board, the game gets even more confused. After one combat, the fake headliner will end up soaking up the bonus bonus trait of the real headliner. But this gets even better, because it doesn't stop at a single trait. In this game, I end up with a fake Echo headliner and buy the Riven headliner in my shop. At this point, I have 2 out of 3 edgelords because of my Riven headliner. At the start of the next round, Echo now grants +1 to edgelord and activates the trait. Even if you sell the Riven, he will still grant +1 to edgelords for the rest of the game. Shortly after, I throw in an Akali headliner, and initially this puts me at 3 true damage. However, after combat is over, Echo now soaks up the headliner effect again and now grants +1 to edgelord and +1 to true damage. Obviously, the most powerful way to use this is to reach chase traits like 10 KDA and collect yourself a free win. Arguably, this might be the most disgusting bug running around at the moment, but while the previous techs are easy to replicate, this one has given me a lot of trouble. So far, I have not managed to find a good setup for it. Maybe I'm just too old and incapable of selling the headliner fast enough. I don't really know. It is a cool bug, but quite frankly, I invested way too much time into trying to get this one to work, so I decided to leave this one alone. Speaking of leaving, I believe I do hear some barking in the background, so I should probably get going. I hope you learned nothing, and see you next time.